Perhaps you've once thought about leaving everything behind, the job, the identity, the chaos. But if there truly were a place for people like that, a place where time stands still and the human heart can begin again, then maybe, just maybe, that place is Ashwell. Step into the story and let Eli, the lost young man, lead you through things that have never been named. The City of Forgotten Names, March in New York. The city suffocates in the scent of rainwater, car exhaust, and dreams that never had time to bloom. Eli lives in a fourth-floor apartment in Bushwick, once an old industrial zone, now a haven for halfway artists and full-time loners. No one remembers the last time Eli had a conversation that lasted more than 3 minutes. He doesn't need that, or at least he hasn't needed it for years. Eli's day starts at 9 a.m. No alarm clock, no Starbucks coffee, no social media. Just Eli, a wooden desk with a burn mark, a few dozen silent antique clocks waiting to be reborn, and a small shop wedged between two high-rise buildings called Time's Quiet Room. The name wasn't Eli's idea. It was a legacy from his grandfather, the last person who ever held Eli in his arms without asking, "Do you have a plan for your life yet?" After his grandfather passed away, Eli inherited the store, and there, in the dust of time and the tick-tock that sounded like the final breath of an old world, Eli learned how to listen. He knew that when a clock ticks clunk instead of tick, the gear shaft might be rusted. When the second hand twitches slightly and stops, it could mean the balance wheel is off by mere microns. But there was one thing he never understood: why the people who brought clocks in for repair never returned a second time, as if the time they entrusted was gone forever. That day started like any other, until the doorbell rang. A delivery man left a small wooden box at the shop's doorstep. No sender, no receipt, no tracking number. Eli frowned. The parcel was wrapped in old burlap, damp and musty, like it had just been dug out of the ground. He unwrapped it. Inside was a jet-black wooden box, no nails, no hinges, only one carved symbol, a tree with roots deep in the earth, and branches reaching toward the moon. He'd seen that symbol before, in an old high school book, or maybe in a dream. Carefully, Eli lifted the lid. Something, cold, heavy, carrying the scent of ancient metal, lay nestled inside, a black stone pendant, hand-carved, with a chipped edge. When the light hit it, it shimmered into a faint violet, like cosmic dust from a nebula. And then, when Eli touched it, the world shattered in a soundless explosion. Time didn't flow. It folded, not moving forward, but falling. Eli didn't faint. He didn't feel pain. There was no cinematic blur. There was simply nothing. No voices. No cars. No scent of the city. No colors. He opened his eyes. Not in his familiar room, but in the middle of an endless field. In front of Eli were waist-high blades of grass, trembling gently in the wind. In the distance, dark green mountains rose beneath clouds that drifted slowly, as if they had nowhere in particular to go. No horns, no streetlights, no signs of the modern world. A swallow darted overhead, so close Eli could hear the wind slicing through its wings. He looked down at his hand. The pendant was gone, and when Eli turned around, he saw a small village, gray wooden rooftops, a windmill standing alone in the field, and a young boy, wearing coarse linen, holding a wooden bow, staring at Eli as though he had fallen from the moon. The boy stared intently. His eyes weren't afraid, just curious, as if weighing which world Eli had come from. Eli tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. Something in the air made it hard to form words, not out of fear, but as if language here belonged to a different rhythm of breath. "Are you a lost one?" the boy asked, his voice raspy, but not childish. Eli nodded. No better words came. "Don't walk alone. Strangers here, they're often called shadows." It sounded like a warning, but the boy turned and began walking, slowly leading the way. Eli followed. The village revealed itself only after he passed through the edge of an ancient pine forest, nestled behind two soft hills, low wooden houses, their roofs shingled with slate. deep wells with waxcloth canopies, and red earth paths, smoothed like the palm of a hand pressed down. No carriages, no wires, no sign this place had ever heard of the 21st century. The boy led Eli to a small house by a stream, where a middle-aged man was braiding rope. His face was weathered by the sun, solemn, but when he saw Eli, he stopped. "Another one," the man said quietly, as if to himself. "How long since the last?" the boy asked. 4 years. Last time it was a Japanese woman." Eli went still. He wasn't the only one to fall into this place. And it seemed this place was used to it. That night, Eli was given a modest room at the back of the house. No electricity, only an oil lamp. No hot water, only the stream. No internet, but that much he had already guessed. The man, his name was Amos, explained that the village was called Ashwell, nestled in an isolated valley with no road leading out. People like Eli were called the Fallen because no one knew how they arrived. No footprints, no clues, no definite time of descent. Only this: once they arrived, they had to live like the others. No formal laws, no one had the right to harm another. But one unspoken rule was always repeated: do not ask about tomorrow. Do not speak of yesterday. Eli felt cold, not from the weather, but from something deeper, a sense that he had just stepped into a world either forgotten or deliberately held back for reasons no one dared to speak aloud. Wind in the wood stove. The next day, Eli was taken to the woodworking shop. The villagers called it the place for idle hands. He learned to use a handsaw, to carve wood, to shape clay pots. And every day, when the sun reached the mountaintop, the bronze bell would chime from the wooden temple roof, signaling everyone to gather and eat together. The meals weren't as delicious as Eli's memories, but strangely, they warmed his heart. Maybe it was the older woman's eyes as she picked out a piece of braised fish for him. Maybe it was the child who smiled when he dropped his spoon. Or perhaps it was simply because no one here ever asked, "What do you do for a living?" The first fracture. On the 7th day, Eli heard music. The sound echoed from the edge of the village, from an abandoned house, roof half collapsed, moss covering the path. No one spoke of the house. When Eli asked, they only shook their heads. That's the place for those who refuse to stay. He didn't understand, but the music, melancholy like wind through bamboo, resonant like it came from the depths of time, kept calling him, night after night. And on a night with a dim moon, Eli followed it. The house lay at the forest's edge where the trees grew twisted, as if trying to hide something. Eli stepped onto the cracked brick steps. The door creaked open, as though no one had touched it for many years. The music stopped. Silence hung in the air like wind that had been caught and held still. In the soft shadow of an oil lamp, a woman sat with her back to him. Her long hair fell freely, her robe made of rough cloth. Before her was an old mandolin, scratched wood body, loosened strings, recently tuned after years of silence. "You're late," she said. Her voice was deep, hoarse, and strangely familiar, as if it had once spoken Eli's name in a dream he could no longer remember. I heard the music," Eli hesitated. "I just wanted—" "Listen closely," she interrupted. "Not everyone can hear it. Only those with a fracture can." Eli frowned. "A fracture?" She turned around. Her face wasn't old, but not young either. It was shaped by a kind of time that could not be measured in years. In her eyes was a sorrow as deep as a frozen lake, locked since a winter that never thawed. "You lost a part of yourself before coming here," she said slowly, "and it never truly left. It only hid." Eli sat down beside her. Outside, the wind began to rise. Inside the decaying house, the music returned. But this time, it didn't come from her hands. It came from the ground itself, as if the house was breathing through sound. "You don't remember, do you?" she asked. "Remember what?" "Why you came here." Eli was silent. A coldness rose from his spine. It was true. He didn't remember. He remembered the cafe. He remembered the box. But before that, only a vast emptiness, like someone had quietly cut a piece of memory and stitched the gap shut with invisible thread. "Some come here to find themselves again," she said. "Some come because they have nowhere left to go. And some come because someone is waiting for them here, even if they don't know it yet." Eli stared at the flickering oil lamp. In that light, he saw a version of himself, worn, fragile, but with something deep inside, beginning to awaken. On the way back, Eli paused on the wooden bridge crossing the stream. The water flowed gently, as if time had never hurried. In his hand was a note the woman had given him. Everyone who falls into this place carries a question, and only when they dare to face it will they know if they truly want to return. Beneath those words, in small black ink, it read, "Do you still remember what made you stop loving the world?" Eli looked up. The moon was bright, still, and alone. For the first time in years, he felt alive. In the village of Ashwell, no one used calendars. There were no Mondays or weekends, only wind days, rain days, and planting days. That morning, Eli woke as the sky was still veiled in mist. Through the slats of the wooden door, he saw little flames flickering through the fog, villagers lighting fires to prepare for the first planting of the season. Amos handed Eli a wooden hoe. "Today is a day for hands," he said, "not for heads." Eli understood. Here, thinking too much was a luxury. Muddy hands were how one earned belonging. Eli was assigned to help an elderly woman named Mabel, who lived alone at the village edge, in a moss-covered house. She was small, hunched, with trembling hands, but her eyes were sharp, like someone who knew more than she let on. "Everyone who falls here is given a piece of land to sow," she said, handing Eli a small cloth pouch filled with seeds. "You don't need to know their names, just sow them without haste." Eli knelt in the soil, digging small holes. He realized people here didn't plant to harvest. They planted to remind themselves they were still alive. Some sow flowers, some sow vegetables, some sow things they've never understood. Mabel smiled. "Do you know what you're sowing?" "I think hope," Eli whispered. That afternoon, as Eli washed his hands by the stream, a group of villagers ran past, shouting, "There's a new one!" He followed them. At the forest's edge, beneath the ancient pine tree, was a middle-aged man, face covered in dust, eyes wide and disoriented. His name was Marcus, a railroad engineer from Boston, year 24. "I was inspecting a subway tunnel," he stammered. "Saw a light, then woke up here." Amos only nodded. "Just like us." "You mean I've been pulled into the past?" Marcus asked in disbelief. "No one knows if this place is the past," Amos said, "or a hidden fold in time. We only know it keeps those who've lost something." That night, Eli couldn't sleep. Something drew him back to the pine tree where Marcus had appeared. When he touched the bark, he felt a hollow patch, as if something were hidden inside. Using a small stone, he pried it open and pulled out an old leather scroll, a map. Not of the village, but of an underground tunnel system deep beneath Ashwell. A circle was marked on the map, directly beneath the village center, and next to it, written in brown ink, "The door only opens when the heart of the fallen no longer longs to return." Eli clenched the paper. Beneath the village, something was waiting. Perhaps a secret, perhaps a way home, or perhaps a question no one dared to answer. That night, Eli dreamed. Not like his usual vague dreams, but sharp, lucid, unnervingly clear. He saw himself standing in a field, in the middle of a dust storm. A woman in a long coat stood with her back to him, beside a dry well. "You promised," her voice echoed, "that you wouldn't leave without taking me with you." Eli couldn't see her face, but his heart pounded. He knew that voice. He shouted, "Who are you?" The woman began to turn, but just before her face came into view, Eli jolted awake. His chest ached, as if he'd run through a field of memories that had been burned. The next day, the villagers brought Marcus to the clay house, where ceramics and pottery were made. They believed that touching clay helped newcomers stick to this world. Eli went with them. Inside the kiln were strange-shaped bowls, not modern, not ancient, but as if shaped by someone who had lived between two ages. The old potter, Henry, let out a raspy laugh when he saw Eli's curiosity. Some who fall here were artists, some were runaways, but no one resumes their old life. Here, it's the earth that decides who you'll become. Then he handed Eli a lump of clay. "Try it, but remember, if the clay cracks in the fire, maybe it's because your heart isn't honest yet." Eli molded it into a pendant, round, with a small tree in the center, just like the one that brought him here. When placed into the kiln, crack! A sharp sound rang out. No one said a word, but in Henry's eyes, there was something that looked very much like a warning. That evening, Marcus came to Eli. In his hand was the map, now cleaned and mounted onto a wooden board. Faded markings were starting to show under the oil lamp's light. "It seems the map changes depending on who holds it," Marcus said. "I can see 2 tunnels now that weren't there this morning." Eli nodded. "I don't think this is a map of the land. I think it's a map of the person." "What?" "Only those willing to walk deeper into their own memory will see the way forward." They sat in silence. The map lay between them like a mirror, reflecting space and their shared sense of dislocation. "Have you ever lost someone?" Eli asked. Marcus didn't answer right away. Then, after a long pause, he nodded softly. "My daughter, car accident, last year." Eli said nothing. He didn't need to ask more. What brought Marcus here wasn't light, it was darkness. The two decided to try finding the path beneath the earth. According to the map, the starting point was the ancient tree at the village center, the place where someone once never returned. They arrived at midnight when the villagers were asleep. Eli pressed his ear against the tree trunk, heard nothing. But Marcus, holding a piece of white chalk, traced a crack running along the bark. Then Eli touched the crack, and suddenly a cold wind swept past, as if an invisible door had just opened. The base of the tree shifted slightly, revealing a small hollow. Inside, a well made of black stone, no rope, no bottom. "Do we go down?" Marcus asked. Eli shook his head. "Not yet, not tonight. Something's still unclear." He turned around and saw Amos standing a few steps away, expressionless, unstartled. "You've seen it," Amos said. "Good, but it's not time. To enter the bottom of the well, your hands must first be washed in water that has never stood still." "What do you mean?" "I mean, if you still long for anything from the old world, it will drown you forever." The next day, the villagers gathered in the fields. It was sowing day. Everyone brought seeds, smiles, and old stories. Eli also went to the field, carrying the pouch of seeds Mabel had given him. But this time, he went alone. He chose a small plot by the stream, planted each seed slowly, gently, as if speaking to himself. "I'm not sure I belong here," Eli whispered, "but maybe I have nowhere else." The wind passed through, soft and light, like a hand comforting from afar. And then, from the soil where he had just planted, a small green sprout pushed upward, so quickly it was unnatural, unordinary. Eli sat upright, staring. The sprout had heart-shaped leaves and a stem of pale violet, the same color as the pendant he'd lost. Autumn. That night, Eli dreamed again. This time, the vision was clearer. The woman still stood by the well, but this time she turned around. It was Anna, Eli's former lover, who had passed away from cancer 3 years ago. He hadn't been with her during her final months. A work contract in Europe had taken him away. She smiled. "You always thought you were the one who left, but really, you were the one left behind." Eli woke with a jolt, drenched in sweat. He remembered. After the dream, he woke with a heart heavy, but clearer than ever before. He walked straight to the ancient tree at the center of the village, where the black stone well still lay dormant, like a sleeping trap. Marcus was already there, holding 2 coils of rope, an oil lamp, and a pouch of dry biscuits. "Tonight isn't to find the way back," Marcus said. "It's to find a reason to stay." They tied the ropes to the roots, lowered them into the well. Cold wind rose in waves, as if the earth was breathing through memories. As they descended, the flickering light of the oil lamp revealed walls carved with symbols, finger-carved marks like diaries of souls who had once fallen. The city beneath Ashwell. The deeper they went, the thicker the air became. But then, light appeared, not from lamps, but bioluminescence glowing from the cavern ceiling, lighting up an entire underground settlement. A small village, low stone houses, lanterns made from glowing seeds. People walked slowly, silently. No one looked at them as strangers. A woman approached, long white hair, a folded leather notebook in hand. She smiled. "Welcome to Lower Ashwell, the home of those who no longer wish to return." Lower Ashwell was a refuge for the fallen, those who had descended and never gone back. They lived simply, without names, without memory. Eli met a man who had once been a doctor, now a candle maker. A girl who had once been an architect, now a writer of unsent letters. "Why didn't you return?" Eli asked. The doctor gave a sad smile. "Because when memories become wounds, some choose to forget in order to live. Here, the past doesn't call your name." Marcus couldn't hide his hesitation. "What if someone wants to return?" he asked. The white-haired woman shook her head. "The door is always open, but the way back is no longer the same path." Tsesok. At the center of Lower Ashwell stood a room, called the Mirror Room. There was no actual mirror, only a wall of black stone where people looked and saw what they had never dared to face. Eli entered, alone. On the wall appeared a hospital room, white. Anna lay in bed. And Eli, at the airport, holding a plane ticket to Zurich, a message from her. "If you go, I won't stop you, but if you stay, I'll never forget." Eli turned away, and in his heart echoed a sound, like the shattering of an old clock. "It wasn't that she left me, it was that I left when she needed me most." He wept. On a windless night, as Eli and Marcus prepared to leave Lower Ashwell and return to the surface, the white-haired woman led them to a deeper chamber, where a scorched wooden door stood. "This door opens only when the heart has chosen," she said. "Once you step through, there's no return." "What lies beyond the door?" Marcus asked. "The place that keeps fire, where memory is either burned or rekindled." Eli looked at the door, then at Marcus. "I'm not ready to forget," Eli whispered. Marcus nodded. "And I'm not ready to forgive." They turned away, did not step through, but carried something none in Lower Ashwell had ever kept, the desire to confront. As they climbed back to the surface, the sun was rising. Its light painted gold on the temple roof, the stream, and their dust-covered hands. Amos waited at the tree's base. He didn't ask anything, only said, "Now you understand why people stay." Eli nodded, but this time there was light in his eyes. "And I understand why I need to keep going." So, Eli returned to the small field by the stream, where the violet sprouts still grew. He sat down, pulled from his pocket the clay pendant, the one that had cracked in the kiln. This time, he didn't try to fix it. He simply placed it beneath the tree, then covered it with soil. Because maybe what is cracked doesn't need to be mended, only accepted. Eli walked across the small square at the center of Lower Ashwell, where a young woman was sitting among rows of wooden tables, surrounded by hundreds of neatly stacked letters. Her name was Leora, around 25 years old. Simple braided hair, a gray fabric tunic without patterns, and eyes as pale as early morning mist. "What are you writing?" Eli asked. "Letters to people I've never met," Leora smiled. "People I think may have forgotten me." Eli glanced at the slanted handwriting, with some lines smudged, as if tears had once fallen on them. One letter read, "I still remember how you tied your shoelaces, even though you never taught me." Another, "You said you would be away for just 2 days. It's been 7 years, and the world hasn't seen your shadow since." "You keep all of them?" "Yes, because if I don't write, I might forget that I was once someone who waited." Eli's hand tightened slightly. Somewhere in him he felt he might have once been someone a letter was written for. At the edge of Lower Ashwell, inside a secluded stone cave, lived a man named Reese, the only person in the village who had never dreamed again after falling here. Reese was tall, quiet, with eyes that looked like they had frozen all memory. It was said he had once been a gatekeeper, a role no one dared to speak of. Marcus went to see Reese, hoping to find clues about a way out, but all he got was one sentence. "If you still dream, you're still being pulled back. As for me, I no longer have a place to dream of." "Who were you?" Marcus asked. Reese looked at him for a long time, then replied, "I was once the one looking for a way out. Now, I'm the one holding the door, so others don't walk the wrong path." The return of memory, Eli began dreaming more frequently. One night, he dreamed of returning to his Brooklyn apartment. The room was drenched in streetlight, but the window wouldn't open. Outside, across the street, stood Anna in her old coat, smiling. "How long do you plan to stay?" she asked. "I don't know, it's peaceful here." But you know peace was never what I was looking for. Eli tried to step out, but the door wouldn't open. The walls began to absorb water. Leora's letters appeared all over the room, words never spoken, forgiveness never granted. He woke, pillow wet with tears, and he knew he couldn't hide in peace forever. Something was calling him forward. Antistorm. Reese handed Marcus a stone key. If you truly want to leave, you must go through the nameless room. Though afraid, Marcus decided to enter. Eli went with him. The room wasn't large, just a single chair, and a dusty, clouded mirror. But when Marcus sat down, the mirror cleared, revealing a scene. His daughter, golden-haired, radiant smile, sitting on the back of a bicycle. Then, a flash of white light, the sound of brakes screeching, and silence. Marcus broke down. He had driven while exhausted, lost control, and never told anyone that he was the cause of the accident. Eli reached out and held his hand. He said nothing. But in that moment, Marcus knew he had forgiven himself. When they stepped out of the room, Reese was waiting, but he was no longer the silent shadow from before. He handed them a scroll, an unfinished map. Drawn on it was another tunnel, one that passed through the ash layer of Lower Ashwell. If you want to return to the surface, Reese said, this path will take you back. But if you go deeper, the final door will appear. And beyond it, there's no second choice. Eli looked at Marcus. Both understood. This journey was no longer about escape. It was about confrontation. As they walked on, they passed through a long stone cavern where names were carved into the walls, names of those who had once fallen but never left a trace. At the end of the path stood a round stone altar. On it, a blue flame burned, burning yet never dying. Reese stepped forward and placed his hand in the fire. Every fallen must carry a flame. Those who cannot will never find their way. Then he placed a shard of flame into Eli's palm. Eli trembled, but strangely, the flame wasn't hot. It was warm, like the first memory of someone holding your hand when you were a child. Eli understood. This flame was memory, forgiven. It was what tethered the soul. Wow. When they returned to Ashwell, the villagers looked at Eli and Marcus as though they had been gone for years. Eli went back to his small plot by the stream, where the violet sprout had grown into a branch reaching skyward. He sat down. In his hand, the blue flame, now a faint glow. But he knew, when needed, it would burn again. Because not everyone comes to Ashwell to leave. Some come to begin again. The final rain came on the second day after Eli and Marcus returned from Lower Ashwell. Since then, the sky had held an uncanny shade of blue. No clouds, no wind, and not a single drop of water. The fields dried. The streams thinned. Young rice bent over, yellowing too soon. Amos, the usually silent, began to frown more often as he looked to the sky. Children coughed more at night. Hens stopped laying eggs. And then, whispers began to spread among the villagers. Could it be that the ones who fell brought misfortune with them? Though Ashwell had no formal laws, it did have a council, known as the Four Lamps, made up of the village's 4 eldest line keepers. They met under the temple roof whenever the village fell out of rhythm, meaning when something was wrong with the balance of sky and earth. This time, they summoned Amos, and, unexpectedly, they summoned Eli too. In the clay-roofed chamber, the oil lamps flickered as though about to melt into the silence. An elderly woman named Rhea, who hadn't left her home in years, finally spoke. You've been to Lower Ashwell. You've touched the fire. Now the skies are dry. Do you think these things are connected? Eli stood. I brought nothing back but the truth about myself. But sometimes, truth itself is fire, and fire burns roots. She said no more. But in the eyes of the others, Eli saw it clearly. He had stepped into the space between trust and suspicion. That night, Eli went deep into the northern forest. Where once a cool stream flowed, now only dry stone remained. There, he met a strange woman. Gray robes, cradling a dead squirrel. She was digging to bury it. When the earth is dry, souls cannot sleep, she said without looking at him. Who are you? Someone who once sowed seeds with tears. But when the tears ran out, nothing grew. A chill ran down Eli's spine, not from fear, but because a part of her words felt like a part of him. Do you know what's happening to the village? The village is only a mirror. When the one who looks into it is not sincere, the water in the reflection evaporates. She turned to go, leaving only one last sentence behind. The gatekeeper. Not everyone sees them, but if you do, don't look away. From that night on, Eli began to dream strange, disjointed dreams. A child standing beneath a burned tree, holding a piece of paper with Eli's name on it. Marcus vanishing in a dream, his voice echoing from deep within the earth. And Anna, this time, no longer smiling. She turned her back, her voice like wind through stone walls. If you don't open it, then who will? Eli woke soaked in sweat. Inside him, a bell seemed to ring faintly. The door was closer than ever. Deem. Amos summoned Eli to his house. On the table sat a single bowl of water, the only one in the house. The offering of water is near, he said. It only happens when the village has gone 3 weeks without rain. Offer to whom? To the gatekeeper. Eli frowned. I thought that was just a myth. Amos looked at him for a long while, then spoke slowly. They're real, not human, not God, something in between. They keep the boundary between staying and leaving. Each drought season, they demand one thing, either water or memory. Sick. On the second day of the offering, Marcus was gone. No one saw him leave. No one heard him enter the forest. Eli followed faint tracks behind the dried-up stream, and there, in the center of a circle of stones resembling an ancient altar, he found a scarf embroidered with the name Eden, Marcus's daughter. Etched into the dirt, barely visible, were the words, I go in search of an answer. If I don't return, let my memory rest in the fire. Eli clenched his fist. His heart pounded like a war drum. Marcus, the man who once learned to forgive himself, was now seeking someone to forgive him. Diswamnasim. Eli picked up Eden's scarf and followed the faint path Marcus had left. The trail narrowed, moss-covered, and as he walked deeper, the air grew still. No wind, no bird song, only the sound of his own footsteps echoing back. At the path's end stood a crumbling ancient shrine, long sealed by villagers with sione and ash. Eli lit a candle. In its trembling light appeared a statue, genderless, face blurred. Its hands held a dry stone bowl. Beneath it was carved, the gatekeeper does not wait for the strong, only for those who fear, yet still step forward. Eli placed Eden's scarf into the bowl. In that moment, the candle flame flared, though no wind blew. A voice echoed inside his mind, source unknown. The door is opening, but not all are honest enough to walk through. When Eli returned to the village, night had fallen. All of Ashwell seemed drained of color, doors shut, fields empty, even the dogs silent. In Amos's home, the fire had gone out. He had left only a note. If you wish to keep the village, go to the well at dead moon. Dead moon, the time between midnight and the moon's lowest descent, when villagers believed the veil between worlds thinned. Eli did not hesitate. He put on his cloak, took the blue flame Reese had once given him, and went to the well. At its mouth, Eli leaned over. This time there was no bottom, no light, only a shadow forming, like mist drawn into shape. A woman's voice rose, as if from within his chest. You have passed through fire, through dream, through memory, but you've not yet asked. What do I truly want? Eli said nothing. He knelt and dropped the blue flame into the well. It fell, and did not go out. Instead, it blazed and expanded, lighting the interior of the well, and there he saw Marcus, seated against the wall, eyes closed. Eli called. Marcus opened his eyes, but he did not speak. He raised a hand, pointing toward a stone door deeper in. Carved on the door, only those unafraid of losing their way may open me. The gatekeeper's shadow approached, its face unclear, but its eyes glowed, still like water. You may open the door, the gatekeeper said, but only one may pass. Eli looked at Marcus, still sitting there, waiting, ready to remain. And then Eli remembered Anna, remembered the first time she asked, "What will you choose? The easy thing or the right one?" Eli turned to the gatekeeper. "Let me stay. Let Marcus return." The gatekeeper said nothing, but the stone door trembled, then opened. Light poured through. A cool wind from another world swept across the ground. Marcus stepped forward, silently. He did not cry. He placed a hand on Eli's shoulder and said, "You reminded me that I once had a reason to go back." Then he walked through the light. The door closed, the light vanished, but for the first time in weeks, a gray cloud appeared over Ashwell. My martyr. Hours later, it rained, not fierce, not hurried, but just enough to fill the fields, to feed the stream, to keep the kitchen fire warm for the season's first porridge. No one asked Eli what had happened, but as they watched him walk through the village, sleeves wet with rain, they nodded. A silent acknowledgement. Amos returned. He said, "You sowed yourself like a seed, and you've sprouted in the hearts of others." Eli wrote his first letter since arriving, a letter to himself. Someday, if someone finds this note and feels they no longer have a place to return to, know this: there is a place that does not ask for perfection, only honesty. Because sometimes, what saves a soul is not being forgiven, but being heard. He folded the letter, placed it in a clay jar, and buried it beneath the violet tree, where it all began. In the sky above, a rainbow appeared, faint, but enough to believe. Ashwell, after the first rain of the season, was reborn in silence. The trees stretched as if they had never known thirst. Small birds returned to perch on the temple roof. The wind chimes that swayed every evening no longer moved only because of the breeze, but as if someone was quietly exhaling from behind time itself. One morning, Eli heard a knock at the door. A stranger from a nearby village arrived, leading a young boy around 8 years old, clutching an old notebook. The boy was found near the stream, the man said, right where the fallen once appeared. No one knows who he is, no one's heard him speak. The boy truly didn't speak, but when he sat down in front of Eli, he opened the notebook. The first page was a charcoal drawing, Eli standing on a violet hill, with a stone door open behind him. The villagers began calling the boy Thorn, after the thorn bushes that grew near the stream. No one knew where he had come from, but every night, each drawing he made sent chills down the spines of the grown-ups. One day, Thorn showed Eli a sketch. A house in the village, crumbling. 3 days later, Mabel's home burned down from a lightning strike. A tree trunk split open, glowing with blue light. 4 days later, Eli and Amos discovered a hidden stone hollow where the fallen had once stood. No one taught Thorn to draw, but his drawings felt as though someone else was drawing through his small hands. That night, Eli dreamed a strange dream. He walked down a long hallway layered in ash. At the end stood a massive door. He opened it and saw himself sitting in an empty room. No table, no chairs, no way out. The walls were covered with hundreds of drawings, each one capturing Eli in a different phase of life. Joy, sorrow, fleeing, falling, rising. At the center of the floor, a single name was carved into the stone, Thorn. Eli woke and understood. The boy wasn't sent to be sheltered, but to help him remember something he had long forgotten. The next day, Eli followed Thorn. No one told him to, but the boy led him to a massive tree at the edge of the forest, a place no one had ever dared to approach. The boy pointed to the earth. Eli began to dig. Beneath the old roots was a wooden hatch, hidden under layers of stone and mud. He cleared it away and opened it. A spiral staircase descended. Deep beneath Ashwell, no lights, no sound, only a wind rising from below, carrying the scent of ash and old paper. At the bottom, Eli stepped into a room with no windows, just a towering bookshelf that nearly touched the ceiling. But all the books were blank. No titles, no words, no time, no authors. Eli pulled one out. On the first page, the words began to appear, handwritten, line by line, as if being written in real time. I once dreamed of a world that no longer needed me, and I searched for a place that required no name to stay, but only when I forgot my name did I truly exist. The next page began to unfold. It was Eli's story, line by line, every decision, every moment he stood at a crossroad. Thorn looked at Eli. In the boy's eyes was something like a mirror, reflecting Eli back at himself, but with eyes that knew too much. When Eli touched the final shelf, a faint figure appeared in the center of the room, dressed in gray robes, hair covering the face, voice soft. This room holds the memories no one dares to read. Do you seek the truth or wish to leave in peace? Eli took a breath. Who are you? I was once you, the one who never had the courage to write the next chapter. What is Thorn to me? He is what you buried. And now he returns to ask, if you could choose again, would you live differently? Eli trembled. He understood. The dream, the door, the name, Thorn, were all the mind's way of preserving memory through symbols. The nameless room was the part of his story he had never dared to finish. On the stone table at the center of the room, a new notebook appeared. A pen lay ready. The first page, blank. A whisper echoed in his chest. If you write, everything will change. There will be no way back. No forgetting. Eli took the pen. His hand shook, but this time, he didn't hesitate. My name is Eli. I once left behind the one I loved most. I once ran away from myself, but I am no longer lost. I choose to stay, to write, to remember, to live. As the final line was written, the room filled with light. Every book on the shelves began to reveal its words, names, dates, stories, all those who had once come to Ashwell. Eli and Thorn returned to the surface. The nameless room disappeared behind the trees, as if it had never existed. But from that day on, whenever the boy drew, his pictures no longer foretold dread. They were images of small, beautiful things to come. A tree blooming, an elderly couple laughing by a stove, a cat sleeping in a sunbeam. And in one drawing at the end of the sketchbook was Eli, sitting and writing, beside a woman with long hair, smiling gently. It was Anna. Elle still has room for the ones who are lost. One late autumn afternoon, as the sunlight fell at an angle like a tablecloth draped over an abandoned banquet, Ashwell witnessed something that hadn't happened in years. A fallen arrived, but not alone. His name was Caleb, tall, broad-shouldered, brown-haired, carrying himself with a confident air, and eyes untouched by the disorientation others had when they first arrived. On his back was a modern backpack, dusty but intact. Inside were a GPS device, maps, even a heart rate monitor. Even more astonishing, Caleb remembered everything, every detail about the present world, and he declared, I came here following a trail, and I know how to leave. When he met Eli, Caleb showed no surprise, but with just one sentence, Eli froze. You still tug at your collar when you're unsure whether to trust someone. Eli went speechless. That was a habit Anna used to tease him about. No one else had ever mentioned it, except for one person, his best friend in university, Caleb. But Caleb had disappeared 3 years ago, on a hiking trip in Colorado. No body was ever found. I didn't die, Caleb said. I fell into this place. But unlike you, I didn't accept it. I looked for a way out, and now I've come back to bring you home. Caleb led Eli and a few villagers along a route he'd mapped, through oak forests, across underground streams, to a cavern so deep it seemed untouched by any soul. But the outcome was always the same. Every path led back to the village, not the same route, but through some folding of space itself. They marked trees, stacked stones, left signals, but when they turned around, everything had vanished. A young boy in the village said, "This village doesn't exist on the land. It exists in people." Then Caleb grew frustrated. He snapped at Eli. "You used to want to leave. Why do you accept being trapped now?" Eli answered softly. "Because sometimes, people need to stay long enough in one place until they no longer feel the need to run." One night, Eli heard whisperers in his home, faint, from nowhere specific. He descended to the wood cellar. In the darkness, a section of the stone wall emitted a subtle hum, like a heartbeat. And then, a voice, quiet but clear. "You're not trapped. You're being held." "Who's speaking?" Eli asked. "A piece of memory you left behind. A part of your soul that refused to leave." The voice continued. "Caleb is real, but his purpose isn't just to return. He's bringing a fracture into this place." As always, Amos didn't speak much, but when Eli told him about the voice in the wall, Amos nodded. It's been a long time since anyone heard voices from the stone. You're still writing the part that has no ending. He took Eli to his attic, opened a hidden drawer. Inside was an old iron box, engraved with the same symbol as the pendant Eli had once touched in New York. This box belonged to Caleb. He came to Ashwell once, but unlike you, he didn't accept it. He tried to take a piece of Ashwell back with him, and was cast out. Cast out how? Not by hands, by memory. Ashwell erased him, but part of him still remembers. Eli opened the box. Inside was an old photograph of 3 people, Eli, Anna, and Caleb. Gisim Gidgiseg. That night, Caleb came to see Eli. Moonlight touched his back like someone used to walking with their own shadow. I was here. I chose to leave, and I lost. But when I saw you, living as part of a place that doesn't exist, I was angry, because I couldn't do it. Caleb wept, for the first time in years. I didn't come back just to save you. I came to ask you one thing. Write my name into your memory so I don't disappear again. Eli returned to the nameless room once more. He wrote a new page, not for himself, but for Caleb. You are part of my memory. You were someone I admired, envied, drifted from, and once loved, but you are not lost. You are someone who was never told. You were allowed to stay. The room lit up, and in a corner, a drawing of the 3 of them on the hill became clear. Caleb did not stay in the village, but he no longer tried to escape. He chose to live on the edge of Ashwell, between 2 worlds, not too close to be bound, not too far to be forgotten. Eli returned to his small garden, tending the violet tree. Thorn was learning to write. The first letter he ever wrote said, "Thank you for not leaving, when everyone else abandoned themselves." And from the stone wall, for the final time, a gentle whisper, "You didn't need the door, because you were the door." On a morning when the fog hung thick like diluted milk, and the sun had yet to gather enough strength to pierce the gray clouds, a new soul arrived in Ashwell. No one knew where he came from. No one saw the moment he fell. But when old Rhea opened her door, he was already there, knees tucked to chest, eyes closed, holding a small silver bell in his hand. When asked his name, he simply replied, "I no longer use my name." The villagers called him Shade, for his slender frame, charcoal-colored cloak, and eyes deep as tree shadows. From the moment Shade arrived, strange things began to happen. The handkerchief Mabel had lost 12 years ago suddenly reappeared, neatly folded in her linen drawer. Rosie's white cat, missing since last winter, came back on its own, curling up in the exact spot on the window ledge. An old broken bowl at Amos's house was found whole again, sitting quietly on the table. Eli began to sense something wasn't right. "Is the village returning memories?" he asked Amos. "No," Amos shook his head. "Someone is borrowing the past to unbalance the present." Shade lived alone in an abandoned wooden house near the forest's edge. He spoke little, but every night he rang the silver bell once, then hung it beside the door. People began to whisper. Each time the bell rang, an old memory was summoned. Eli decided to confront him. "Do you know what you're doing to the village?" Eli asked. Shade looked out toward the trees and said quietly, "I'm only doing what someone once did for me, returning the pieces others left behind. But piecing together the past doesn't bring peace, it only makes the present more tangled." Shade smiled, for the first time, but it was a smile so sorrowful it stilled the air. Because true peace never lies in forgetting. It lies in being able to bear the pain of remembering. Baum. That night, Eli dreamed, not the usual kind, but a long hallway, lightless, soundless. Along the hallway hung coats, each with the name of a villager, but at the very end was one coat with no name, no buttons, no sleeves. When Eli approached, the coat put itself on him, and suddenly, in the dream, he became Shade, ringing the bell, looking at familiar faces he could no longer name. Zaig. He awoke with a start, and understood. Shade wasn't someone who brought back the past. He was the one who carried it. for those who couldn't. Oh no! Eli and Thorn went together to the old basement room, where once blank books were slowly revealing words. Strangely, each name appeared, then vanished, then reappeared, as if caught in a loop. Among them was a name Eli hadn't seen in years, his first love before Anna, the one he had tried to forget. Eli asked Thorn, "How do you know these names?" The boy whispered, "I don't know, I just hear them, in the walls, in the bell." But there's one name that never appears. Who? Shade. Eli confronted Shade again. "You were once a fallen, weren't you? Not newly arrived, but someone who lived here before, had a name, was forgotten." Shade looked at him. This time he didn't look away. "Yes, I once lived in Ashwell, once had a name, once loved someone, but I chose to forget. So they wouldn't have to remember someone so broken. Who was it that you loved?" Shade smiled, and tears fell. "It was me. I couldn't forgive myself. So Ashwell erased me, but I came back, not to be remembered, but to remember for others." Eli, Thorn, and Amos cleared a new path into the forest, after a great wind revealed a cave hidden behind twisted trees. Inside was a door, no lock, no symbol, no inscription, only a single line carved above. "Only those who no longer need a name may pass." Shade stood before the door. He turned. "Thank you," he said, "for letting me be remembered, as someone who was never truly forgotten." Then he stepped through. No light, no sound, but peace. Eli returned to Ashwell and wrote in the white journal within the nameless room, "Some people come here not to be named. They leave only a question. If stripped of name, of title, can we still live fully, honestly?" The next day, the silver bell no longer rang. But in Thorn's drawing, a single figure appeared, walking quietly through the mist, in the distance, where no road was needed. On an early winter morning, Eli woke as usual and opened the wooden window glazed with dew. But today, something was different. On the table, among old notes and a small potted plant, there was a strange book, dark leather bound, no title. As he opened it, flipping through the first few pages, Eli felt his heart stop. The first page was a conversation he had once had with Caleb by the well, each word perfectly recalled. The second page held a private journal entry from 3 months ago, something he had never shared with anyone. And beyond that were things he hadn't yet done, but was about to. The final page bore a handwritten line, "I do not write Eli's life, I only record it, before he realizes he is living it." Eli took the book to Amos, who remained silent. Then he handed Eli a yellowed sheet of paper. "I once saw someone with a book like that, but they never read the final page, because the last page always changes depending on the reader." Eli understood. This was no diary, no fiction. It was a mirror of fate, reflecting every possibility in his life, every choice, every turning point. That night, Eli read the unwritten part. Eli will walk into the western woods on a day of light rain and meet the one who was once a crossroads. He wasn't sure, but by noon the next day, just as the book had written, it began to drizzle, and when he entered the western woods, someone was waiting. It was Anna. Not a ghost, not a dream, but Anna, hair tied back in the same gray coat she wore the last time. "You're late," she smiled. Eli froze. How are you here?" Anna stepped closer, gently touched his hand. "I too fell, but I didn't choose to appear. I just waited until you were ready." She led Eli to a place he had never seen, a wooden cabin in the heart of the forest, where no tree looked the same and no bird sang the same note twice. Inside, a table filled with books, each one the life of a fallen, some thick, some thin, some unfinished, and one chair empty. On its back, carved words. "The writer cannot live another's life." Anna said, "Someone has always recorded what happens in Ashwell, not to control anyone, but to help someone remember what was forgotten. Who is that person? No one ever knew, but perhaps it is the part of ourselves we left behind, before being allowed to stay here." Eli returned to Ashwell, carrying the book. He placed a pen on the last blank page, and for the first time, the words did not appear on their own. He had to write. And as he did, The faint ink on the previous pages began to fade, as if fate was saying, if you have the courage to write the next part, the past will stop ruling the rest. Eli wrote, I don't want to live as if I'm the result of what has already happened. I want to live as if everything can begin again, from the place I once thought it ended. That night, the book disappeared from the table, but in its place on the window was a new note, neatly written, each of us is the author of our final book, but only those who can hear silence clearly will be calm enough to name it. Eli smiled. He no longer needed to read on, because he finally understood. Life doesn't need to know the ending, only the quiet to feel every word being lived. Eli said nothing as he stood before Anna, the girl from the final memory of his former world, with resigned eyes and a farewell no one dared keep. Forest winds stirred her hair, but her gaze remained the same, gentle, as though the 3 years apart had never passed. Are you real? Eli whispered. Anna didn't answer with words. She stepped closer, placed her hand over his heart, where it beat fast, like time reversing itself. This place has always been real, she whispered. It was only us who lacked the courage to live truthfully in it. Eli bowed his head. All the things he had once wanted to say gathered in his throat, not out of pain, but because he realized she had never left. He had simply never stepped forward. Anna led Eli into the small cabin in the woods, a place unlike Ashwell, no windows, no birdsong, no sounds of nature, only the faint rustle of paper against paper. She lit an oil lamp, guiding him past the rows of shelves. Each book is a life recorded when someone lived in Ashwell, she said, written by what people call the final rememberer, but no one really knows who that is. Has anyone ever read their entire life? Eli asked. Some tried, but at the final page they lost all memory, because sometimes knowing what comes next means you no longer have a reason to continue living. Eli shivered. He understood. Living is accepting the unknown, walking through fog, and trusting the sun is still ahead. In that library, there was a wooden door. Behind it, the room without time, no clocks, no ticking. And more than that, everything inside was still, even the air. Anna said, when the writer doesn't want time to influence them, they enter here. Eli stepped inside. He felt as if part of him had been held still. On a table was a new book, completely blank. No title, no pages, no dedication. When Eli touched it, words began to form. Eli will meet someone who will change everything he believes is real, and that person is not Anna. Eli faced the question, who is writing these things? Why do they know the future before it happens? He flipped quickly, but each new page faded before his eyes, as if the book itself knew he was trying to outrun time. Anna stepped into the room, handing him a small mirror. Want to know who writes it? She said gently. Look into this, sus, when your heart is truly still. Eli stared at the mirror. At first, he only saw his own reflection, tired, anxious. But then, behind the image appeared another Eli, thinner, calmer, older, writing in the book with white ink. Eli was stunned. Is that me? From the future? Anna nodded. It's the part of you that was never brave enough to live. Eli walked out of the room, hands shaking. He knew one thing. He had always been, and still was, the one writing every choice. There was no fate pre-written, no one pulling strings. Only one Eli, quiet enough to record what had happened, and waiting for another Eli, brave enough to keep writing without knowing the ending. He met Anna again, took her hand, for the first time, not out of regret, but because he finally believed that even if she was memory, or real, this feeling belonged to now. Back in Ashwell, Eli sat on the doorstep, holding the book. One final page remained, blank. No words, no instructions, no hints. He wrote, I choose to live without needing to know what the next chapter will be. Because life doesn't have to be safe. It only has to be honest. Wind rose, lifting the page gently into the air. As it fell, the back revealed a line that had never been there before. The writer does not record what will come. They only help the living find courage to keep going when no one else is holding their hand. That night, Ashwell drifted into mist. Eli sat alone beside the violet tree, the old book resting on his lap. In the pale moonlight, he smiled and whispered softly to himself, Thank you, writer. Whoever you are, or maybe whoever I am, for not giving up. One early morning in March, the air in Ashwell shifted with a light breeze, carrying the scent of wildflowers and damp earth. Eli opened his door as usual, intending to water the plants, when he noticed an envelope wedged beside the window frame. Faded yellow paper, handwritten, no signature, no witness to who had delivered it. The handwriting was fine, steady, and quiet. If you are reading this letter, then perhaps Ashwell is nearing its end. Do not be afraid. An ending does not always mean farewell. Sometimes it is the way a memory is gently placed down, so the hand can hold something new. Someone from ahead that day, Eli noticed a strange stillness settling over the village. Birds had stopped singing. The wind no longer rustled the leaves. When he knocked on Amos's door, the man sat silent as carved wood, eyes open but with no reflection. Eli ran to the square calling for Thorn. The boy was sitting and drawing, but only blank space. "There's nothing left to draw, Uncle," Thorn said. "It feels like everything's holding still, like the world has stopped breathing." That night, Eli could not sleep. Before dawn, he heard a soft knock on the table. Someone was sitting inside his home. It was Eli from the time before he came to Ashwell. No long hair, no coarse clothes, eyes sharp, shoulders firm. The old Eli, full of things the present one had since forgotten. "Are you me?" Eli asked. "Yes, I am the part you left behind, so you could exist here. Why have you come back? To ask, are you ready to leave, now that Ashwell no longer needs to hold you?" Thorn led Eli to a secret place, a hidden room in the lowest level of the nameless room. There sat a book no one had ever opened. On its cover, the history of a place that will disappear. But if someone reads this to the very last line, it will live again in a new way. Eli opened it. The first page read, "Name, Ashwell. Type, collective memory. Purpose, to hold those losing themselves." And at the end, one incomplete line, "Time of dissolution, Wakar, no date, not yet written." That night, Eli lay among the purple flowers, once the forbidden field. He dreamt a different dream, one with no one else in it, only a massive door made of light. Above it, "This is not a door for those who abandon. This is a door for those brave enough to end." The door required no key, only the letting go. The next morning, Eli saw a group of strangers passing through the village. They did not speak, did not look at anyone, but wherever they walked, roofs crumbled into dust, trees shed leaves. They weren't destroying, they were clearing, as if Ashwell was no longer meant to exist. Amos woke, smiled. "We've held this place long enough. Perhaps it's time for others to find what they need, somewhere new." Eli sat by the violet tree. In his hands, the book with no end date. He could write it, or leave it forever blank. Anna appeared, quietly as always. She didn't ask, didn't insist, she only said, "If Ashwell is a boat for those who don't know where to go, then I think this boat has reached its shore." Eli asked, "And if no one disembarks?" Anna smiled sadly. "Then it's still a boat, but no longer a vessel." After reading the letter, Eli felt something familiar. He compared the handwriting to an old journal from chapter 5, and realized the handwriting in the letter was his own. Thorn looked at him, whispering, "Could it be you've already lived this moment before, in another time? Could it be that Ashwell already happened, and now you've returned to end the circle?" The thought made Eli breathless. If I sent the letter to myself, then did I already know the ending all along? As he walked around the village, everyone was kind, quiet, but weightless. No more loud laughter, no one calling out, not even small debates about planting, boiling water, or stoking fires. Eli realized they were all living as if they had already finished living. They were like weightless souls, walking the last stretch, unaware they were about to vanish. He went to find Amos, who sat before the fire, his eyes strangely bright. "You remember," Amos said, "the first day you arrived. The wind didn't blow for an entire morning." Eli nodded. Nothing moved that day. Amos smiled. "That was Ashwell deciding whether to keep you. You were chosen. But now, Ashwell is asking you back. Do you still need it?" Eli said nothing. Amos placed a hand on his shoulder. "If there's anything that keeps a place alive, it's someone truly wanting to stay. But if everyone already carries it in their heart, then it no longer needs to be a place. The old version of Eli, the one from New York, appeared not just as a vision, but as a living mirror of someone still waiting. They sat across from each other, the past. Eli asked, "Do you remember what first made you sit alone in a crowded city and feel like no one was around?" Eli answered, "Because you were gone, and no one ever taught me how to keep going." The other smiled. "Do you know how now?" Eli nodded softly. "I do. No one needs to teach you. Just be quiet enough to hear your heart." In the nameless room, when Eli opened the unfinished book, a new line had appeared midway. If the writer does not mark the date of fading, then this place remains a seed that may not grow here again, but will bloom in the heart of someone ready to plant it elsewhere. Eli closed the book. He didn't write the end. He didn't destroy. He didn't hold on. He simply let go. A new figure appeared briefly. No one knew where they came from. They said nothing, just walked around the village, bowing before each door. Before Eli's house, they left a small stone, carved with a single word: continue. Eli understood. Endings don't need grandeur. Sometimes, just one person willing to continue is enough. The day Ashwell faded, there was no explosion, no flash of light, no collapse. Only rooftops turning light, branches becoming wind, paths dissolving into mist. Everyone just walked away. No one looked back, no embraces, no tears, because they carried Ashwell with them. They didn't leave it behind. Eli sat on the hill, Thorn asleep on his shoulder. Before him was a sky that bore no trace of Ashwell, just a sky, open. Without frame, Eli wrote one final line on a small paper slip. Ashwell didn't need to last forever. It only needed, once, to give someone enough peace to begin again. He released the note into the wind, not for anyone else to read, just for the wind, to carry it to someone who needs a place to be still. Since the day Ashwell dissolved, Eli and Thorn had been living on the outskirts of a small town up north. No official name, just called the Ordinary Place. People there lived as people do elsewhere: work in the morning, eat in the evening, rest on weekends. No one spoke of the place they once dreamed, once fell into, once remembered too deeply. But Eli carried something unseen, an unfinished moment. He rewrote fragments of memory, not in order, not in chapters, just short passages, like someone tidying the drawers of the heart. One day, while standing outside a second-hand bookshop, Eli spotted a man reading Volume 1, the very book he had written. What sent a chill down his spine? That face, unchanged after 15 years. It was Reese, who once lived beneath the lower village, Chapter 3, the one who had given Eli the blue flame. Eli approached. Reese looked up and smiled. "You finally finished the beginning. Now it's time to write the next part." Reese led Eli to an attic flat in the city. Inside, the walls were covered with hundreds of maps, sketches, pinned notes. All of them read, Ashwell, another form. New memory branch. Those who never walked in but still remembered. Reese said, "You thought Ashwell ended? No. Ashwell was never a place. It's a mechanism, a ways memory transforms. And when someone carries it, they plant a new seed. You're one of them." Reese introduced Eli to a group of 7 people, some young, some old. None of them had ever been to Ashwell, never fallen, never seen the stone door or the white room. And yet, all of them remembered Ashwell, without knowing why. A teacher who dreamt of violet fields every night. An old man who once dreamt of writing letters to a stranger he'd never met. A 5-year-old girl who drew a wall that whispered, like the talking stone wall from Chapter 6. Reese said, "Collective memory doesn't need a guide. It just needs someone to hold the flame long enough for the light to reach elsewhere." Eli returned home, opened his old draft, blank pages, but his fingers wouldn't write. He dreamed, saw himself standing in the vanished violet field, at a fork. 1. One path led back into the light, where everything was understood, but never relived. 2. One path wound into the dark forest, where every step became someone else's memory. A voice echoed, eerily like the final scribe from Chapter 8. "If you go on, you are no longer Eli of the story. You become the one who keeps the fire for others." Thorn was now 17. He didn't draw often, but every image he created was a memory no one had ever told. He said to Eli, "We've found 3 others like me. They hear stories no one tells. They remember places they've never been. Eli sat in silence. Thorn added, "Some people are born to carry Ashwell in their hearts, not because they once fell, but because they are the place others will fall into." That night, Eli heard 3 soft knocks at the door. No one was there, only a folded letter, thick paper, red ink. It's time for Eli to step beyond his part. It's time for the story to be written, not in memory, but in the light from others. Inside was a new map, not just of Ashwell, but dozens of bright points just like it. At the bottom, a handwritten line. Everyone who once lived in Ashwell can become another Ashwell. Choose not to continue living, but to hold space for someone else to begin. Eli stood on the hilltop, the city blurred behind morning mist. Thorn by his side, Reese in the distance. Scattered across the world, those who had never been to Ashwell, yet remembered it. Eli understood. Ashwell is not gone. It has only changed form, and those who were once healed, was if quiet enough, become a place of healing for others. He picked up a pen, wrote into the new, unnamed book. I will no longer write my own story. I will write the beginning of someone else's. Eli, Thorn, and Reese quietly observed those who carried Ashwell's seed, people who had never been there, yet still felt its memory. One morning, Eli opened his bookshelf and found that half the notebook he once wrote in had vanished. Pages removed, yet not torn, as if someone who once existed within that story no longer did. At the same time, a girl from the Memory Keepers group lost the ability to remember her mother's name. A young boy forgot he had once visited a place full of purple flowers. Reese whispered, Ashwell's memory is withdrawing. Not because people forget, but because it is pulling itself back. Eli, Reese, Thorn, and 7 other Flame Keepers gathered in an old room, once a small chapel. They called it the Final Gathering, but never gave it an official name, because if it had a name, someone would have to call it again. Eli said, We're holding on to a memory that isn't meant to stay forever, but the question is, why keep it, and for whom? Reese revealed a truth. Ashwell was once a memory station, but if everyone who lived there now carries a seed, the original place becomes hollow. Someone said, then perhaps part of the memory must fade. Only what is truly needed for the next person should remain. A woman in the group, named Era, stood up. She had been the first to have her Ashwell memory awakened through Reese's sketches. Now, she said, I've held others' pasts, but I've never had a story of my own. I choose to be the first to release Ashwell completely, to make space for someone else to start anew. Era stepped out of the circle of light. No one stopped her. Moments later, the map Eli held, marking Era's location, faded. No more ink, no more path. Thorn whispered, she has left the memory, and no one is holding her back. That night, Eli had a strange dream. He stood before a towering spire built entirely from written memories. Pages fluttered like leaves. Conversations from chapter 1 through chapter 12 echoed. But the lowest level had no foundation. Anna's voice drifted in. If you keep writing onto memory without leaving space for the future, the memory will collapse. Eli woke in sweat. He looked toward where Ashwell once stood, now just a faint light in the heart. And he understood. Ashwell needed to be dismantled. Not to disappear, but to take root somewhere else. Eli took the final journal, the one recording everything since chapter 1. He brought it to the small river near the collective memory field, where everyone once dreamed together. In front of them all, he tore each page, not burned, not hidden, but released into the water. With each page floating away, the light grew gentler. With every story that left his hands, a part of him grew lighter. Reese placed a hand on Eli's shoulder. We don't need to keep what once saved us. We only need to be sure. It was beautiful enough that no one regrets walking past it. Thorn went home and opened his sketchbook. The first page, for the first time in years, was not a memory, nor a premonition. He drew a newborn child, opening its eyes for the first time. No memory, no burden, but in the eyes was an Ashwell no one had ever drawn before. He titled the drawing, The One Who Will Find Everything We Let Go. The retreat wasn't loud. There was no loss in the usual sense, only each memory keeper stepping away from their role, each map vanishing as if never printed. each word silently erased from old walls. Eli sat by the steps, no longer writing. He held a blank sheet of paper and wrote, "The most beautiful memories are those we're brave enough to leave behind for someone else." The wind carried the note away. Maybe no one would find it, but maybe someone about to fall might stumble upon it. 1 week after the final retreat, Eli woke with the sense that his heartbeat was echoing something outside. Not a person, not a memory, but life itself. He opened the door. Before him was something no one had expected. Where once lay the collective memory field, empty soil, dust, now stood a garden. No one had planted it, no one had watered it, yet hundreds of flowers had bloomed, each carrying a different feeling. One exhaled the sharp scent of anger long suppressed. Another was cold, like a touch never given. Another trembled when someone came near, as if saying sorry on someone else's behalf. Eli, Thorn, and Reese stepped in. No one gave directions, but their feet moved as if led by unspoken things. In the center of the garden stood a tree, no leaves, no blossoms, but its trunk was hollow. Inside was a wooden chest. Eli opened it. Inside were dozens of slips of paper, each with a single line. "Mom, I never hated you. I was just sad I didn't understand your pain. I did love you that day, but I was too scared to hold you back, thinking I wasn't enough. I'm sorry, Dad. I wish I'd hugged you one last time." Thorn touched a soft violet flower. It glowed faintly. Then a sound escaped, barely audible, like a breath. "I don't need your forgiveness. I just need you to know I never meant to hurt you." Eli stood still, his eyes red. He understood. These flowers were the crystallization of what had been swallowed in silence. Everyone who had passed through Ashwell, who had left words unfinished, who had held silence out of fear, now they could speak, without having to speak. In one corner of the garden, a small tree stood alone. A wind chime hung from its branch. The wind blew, the chime rang, and a letter drifted to Eli's feet. The handwriting was familiar. It was Anna's. "Eli, if you're reading this, the garden has bloomed. I was never a person who fell. I was a memory you held so long. I became real. I don't blame, I don't resent. I only want to say, you've become strong enough not to need me beside you, and only then was I free to move on. At the end, let what's unsaid bloom into flowers." Reese wrote a slip, folded it like a seed, and buried it in the soil. Thorn drew an outstretched arm, then tore the sketch, wrapped it, and placed it by the tree's roots. Eli wrote a single line. "Dad, I understand now. That unreturned hug years ago wasn't coldness. It was trembling." He set it down. Within minutes, an amber flower bloomed. Its scent like an old coat left in the winter bathroom. The next morning, the garden was gone. Only smooth soil remained, and a soft fragrance in the wind. No one saw the flowers, but everyone who passed by felt something lighter inside. Eli wasn't sad. He knew. The garden didn't need to last forever. It just needed to bloom long enough for someone to be forgiven for what they never dared to say. 1 week after the final retreat, Eli woke with the sense that his heartbeat was echoing something outside. Not a person, not a memory, but life itself. And garden sequence remains unchanged. Eli cleaned the small attic, the temporary shelter after Ashwell had vanished. On the table remained only a notebook, with one final line unwritten. The last page, pale ivory, glowed in the sunlight like a whisper unspoken. He had written 14 lines, each a season past. Only the 15th remained, meant for what was to come. That afternoon, Eli and Thorn walked to the edge of the woods. They weren't searching, just walking. There, between 2 rows of freshly bare trees, a wooden door appeared. No one had built it, no hinges, no handle. It stood simply, as if it had been waiting since before the first footsteps. Thorn whispered, "The final door." Eli approached. He didn't open it, just placed a hand gently on the wood, warm, like the skin of someone once embraced at goodbye. Beside the door, someone stood. No face, no clothes, no shadow. But Eli knew it was himself, from the future. Not weary, not anxious, simply still. As though he had walked every path. The figure spoke. "This door is not to leave, not to return. It's where you realize there's nothing more to seek, and because of that, everything begins." Eli asked Sissy softly, "And if I don't open it?" The other smiled. "Then the door remains, but you won't need it anymore." Eli looked back. He saw Anna, silent. He saw Reese, holding the blue flame. He saw Marcus, Amos, Era, Shade, all stood afar, yet their eyes felt close. No one waved, no one said goodbye. Because this journey needed no farewell. Before the final door, Eli placed his hand over his heart. It beat like the day he first fell into Ashwell. He held the notebook and didn't write the last line. He left it blank, not for lack of words, but because he knew the next reader would write their part. Thorn, now grown, approached a boy standing alone in a crowded street, his gaze like Eli's long ago. The boy asked, "What's Ashwell?" Thorn smiled. "It's where people find the part of themselves they once left behind. But now it's no longer a place, it's anyone brave enough to begin again." Eli stepped away from the door, didn't open it, didn't pass through. The door remained, like a metaphor that needed no explaining. He walked into the crowd, no one noticed him. But someone brushed his shoulder, then smiled, as if they had once shared a home without a name. The final line of the book, written by the reader. If someone asks me whether Ashwell was real, I won't answer. I'll ask instead, have you ever needed a place to begin again? If so, then that place has lived within you all along.